How many of you know what this is? This is a Sony Ericsson cell phone from about 13 years ago. This, along with other phones like the Motorola Razr, are both figuratively and, in the case of the Razr, literally on the cutting edge of human communication. But all they could do was talk and text. Isn't it amazing how obsolete and antiquated these little devices seem now? Smartphones are able to allow us to send emails, to book rides, to get apartments on Airbnb, and are ultimately gateways to the cumulative knowledge of the entire human species. So yeah, they justifiably blow this little guy right out of the water. But every silver lining has a cloud. While smartphones have been able to revolutionize the way that we communicate with one another and the way that we learn, they've also changed us, and not for the better. Research out of NYU has stated that people check their phone about 150 times every day, which translates to about 7 years of the average lifespan. I challenge all of you to think about whether those 7 years would be actually productive time that you'd spend on your phones, or whether it'd be filled with really awful Logan Paul videos or memes that your friends tag you in. Probably the latter, at least in my case. So, all of us kind of intuitively know this. We all know that we spend a lot of time on our phones, that it probably isn't good for us. So the question then remains, why is it that statistically a majority of everyone in this audience will likely look at their phone at least once during this entire competition? And I think there's 3 main reasons why that's probably true. Firstly, because companies have an incentive to keep you locked onto your phones. Because society, secondly, has disdained solitude. And because of the intense network effects that social media has produced. So let's talk about this first concept of why companies have an incentive to keep you on. Human beings have what's called novelty bias. It's part of an innate mechanism to reward you for things that would have helped us survive in the olden days, much like how eating sugar or eating fatty foods helped us survive. But much like how McDonald's and Coca-Cola have taken advantage of this innate human tendency, so too has social media companies like Facebook, like Twitter, taken advantage of novelty bias. And they do this because a business model has arisen where advertisers are king, where they need to placate their clients by keeping the users at the end of their products constantly on their phones. And they do this because they offer free services to users, because they have snappy names and fancy titles and colorful applications that all come together to create a noxious potion that all of us are always drinking. But the second point is more so about solitude and more so about society's views of solitude. If you think back to that last party that you went to, you might recognize a feeling where you found yourself by yourself, looking from your left to your right, not seeing anyone that you know, and all you feel is that twinge, that little tug that's pulling you towards that little dopamine kick that's just sitting right in your pocket. That same behavior actually occurs when you go anywhere by yourself, when you're on the beach, when you're walking the halls, or you're walking down Main Mall. You feel that little pull. And what feeds into that is what's called variable reward. B.F. Skinner was a psychologist in the 1970s who looked into variable reward in animals. Pretty much what he found was that animals were more likely to do a task if they did not know when they would receive a reward. Now this is analogous to when you check your phone for notifications, right? Because 9 times out of 10, most notifications on your phone are pretty useless. But there is that chance that you may get something from a friend or something important, so you're constantly checking it. That means that you're constantly pulled into this world where you have to be on your phone and you have to be looking at it. But the problem is that solitude and being alone is one of the most important parts of the human experience. When you find yourself alone and when you don't have the opportunity to get sucked into your phone, you appreciate the world around you, or at least you're forced to. You're forced to introspect, to see about your place in the world and how you can interact with it. You can think about what's been going on in your life and you can assess your place in the world. That's something that social media robs us of being able to do in those circumstances. Now the last thing I want to talk about is the network effect, which is pretty much a phenomenon that occurs that states that certain services improve when more people buy into the service and start using it. So I challenge you to think about that one person that you may have met who's never been on social media, who said that they don't have Facebook. What are the first things that you think about when you hear that from someone? Usually that they're kind of weird, a little outdated, that they're hiding something. Usually whatever it is, it's not positive, right? But the problem is that we all feel this generally about everyone when they stop using social media. When you have a friend who never responds on social media or is checking out of it, you treat them in a way that's kind of stigmatizing. You think that they're either being lazy or just not great in that way. This creates a vicious cycle that perpetuates the use of social media and constantly checking your phone. It perpetuates this entire system. So in closing, what do we do? Well, they say that knowing is half the battle. So you're welcome. I won half the battle for you already. But in order to actually make change, we need to take action. And so here are some actions. 1, try to protect time with people that are important to you and disconnect from your phone and disconnect from social media when you can. Secondly, try to savor those moments of solitude that you find yourself in when you feel that pull. And lastly, don't stigmatize friends who are trying to do the exact same. Only when we all work together can we realize the fact that the cutting edge doesn't have to cut so deep. Thank you.